Right, and we are rolling. Hello, everybody, all you glorious people of the multiverse. It is the Freelancer back again with Jake for the Dark Council
Hello.
podcast, and we are here once again to discuss all the things Star Wars, the glorious tales and shit that exist in the galaxy far, far away. And we have our first character episode today.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
So we revealed it in the last one last video we discussed TIE fighters and Imperial pilots. Now we discuss probably the most infamous Imperial pilot. That being that of the infamous soontir fel. For those of my fellow X-Wing fans, you will understand this character all too well. So, bit of preface before I even get into the summary. Little behind the scenes note for this character. The entire concept behind soontir fel was a design choice of let's make an Empire's version of the Red Baron. Was kind of their story idea for this character.
Yeah, okay. I'm already down. The Red Baron's dope.
Yeah. So they came up with this one both as a sort of Red Baron style character, and they also apparently decided to make him as sort of a rival, I think, for a lot of the X-Wing comics. So he is prominently featured throughout those. He does
Cool.
feature in some notable material that comes up later on. Does feature in a couple other bits. Most notably, I think, is I think most notably probably is when you actually see him in Galaxies, because as another little behind the scenes note is he exists as one of the Imperial pilot storyline characters in Galaxies that you actually get to interact with.
Also dope.
So he comes up through those, but he's also an enemy in the Rebellion storyline. He appears in a TIE Interceptor that you fight in one of the missions as the Rebellion in the pilot stories. So there's a bit of that there. But think with all that said, there's a bit that goes on with this character, and I'm going to go ahead and start dipping in on the summary of this character before we actually deep dive on him any further. So, soontir fel is a Corellian male human, grew up to a farming family. Fields his family tended served as the training grounds for the young man before he would join the Imperial Academy to go off to not only become a TIE pilot, but serve as the Empire's best pilot among the likes of Lord Vader himself, reviving the Imperial 181st Fighter Wing and earning himself the title of Flight Baron. He would
It's such a dumb title, but it's still so cool.
He would also be one of the more infamous characters to actually see well past the Vong War, and his legacy lives even beyond that.
Impressive.
And we will definitely get to talking about his legacy, as there's one character in his lineage that is going to be especially key before and during, even after the Vong War. So we will be talking about that character relatively decently when we get to him, but today we will be talking about the good soontir fel. And that little bit out of the way, it's not only thanks to there's another bit. It is not only thanks to his children that he was even able to survive that long, but also of the late Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn is part of the reason he even got to see that far into history.
Cool.
So, touching on soontir fel's early life. soontir fel was born in the asteroid bottomlands region of Corellia in 28 BBY, roughly 6 years before the Clone Wars would break out galaxy-wide, and 9 before the rise of the Empire. Fel's father worked as a transport pilot for Allied Grain and Roughage, or AGR, as you will hear me mention them in the video overall. They are an agricultural company based on Karelia, which most of his family, including his brother Totterfell, as well as his siblings, would all come to work for them at some point in time. His mother worked for them, and as mentioned prior, his father worked as a transport pilot for them, which does serve as a point for part of where his piloting skill comes from. You know anything about Corellians, you know they have a very storied history of piloting. But while his other siblings are not exactly named, there is at least two that are supposedly documented. That being a brother and sister. The only other sibling that is mentioned is Totterfell, a younger brother of soontir. Um, he was taught. Fell was taught a lot of the values of strict loyalty, virtue, and dependence on each other from his family. Him learning to put his family above all. He was skilled at farming and would also become quite adept at piloting through working on the Agro Combine, which he flew around in the AGR's lands on a skyhopper, as many skilled pilots do.
Oof.
We're
Oof.
looking at most of the fucking Tatooine boys on that one.
Oh. Oh. Oh no.
What's funny about this, even still, is his skill actually won him 2 consecutive years in a airspeeder race. His piloting skills won him 2 consecutive years in a annual airspeeder race.
Oh, cool.
So he has that much going for him.
He's like younger Anakin.
Technically, he is younger than Anakin by this point.
I mean, he's always younger than Anakin.
Yeah. So one day, Fell's father had accidentally suffered contact with poison during work, rendering him incapable of performing his duties. During this time, Fell actually stepped up and took over flying for his father and did so to the point he basically took over his father's job despite being 11.
No, okay, so is that because he's so good at his job or his dad was so bad at his job?
It was because he was so good at his job.
Okay.
He had that much potential that he actually was performing that well that he was able to do not only take over his father's work but outdo his father's work, to the point that when he turned 18, his father actually arranged to have him work in his stead, while Fell's father worked in the department store in the department shop for AGR. And Fell would spend the next few months delivering supplies and parts, making field repairs in his own right, and essentially adding on to another income source for his family. So here is the mark where things start to kind of take into where his life is going to meet its first big change. So during a annual harvest festival, Fell would come upon a female friend named Pammer, who would be seen being not very nicely talked to by a group of boys. And these boys all would be one by name, one Elir Post, as well as 2 younger men, would try to have a not very decent conversation with this woman. Obviously, I am trying to play up the censor filter for Twitch, so
Yeah.
But Fell obviously would come to confront these boys, and kind of a double-edged sword on his part, because each of them were all the sons of big figures among AGR.
So of course they were.
And when Feld would come to Pammer's aid, he would in fact beat all 3 into submission.
Hell yeah.
And the local police, who were in fact loyal to AGR, would not prosecute the children of the higher-ups, in Post's case being that of a board member.
Gotta love
Therefore,
stories of corrupt cops.
Fel went to the one group that knew that he could actually rely on them, the Corellian Security Force, otherwise known as Corsec,
Yeah, Corsac.
where Inspector Hal Horn took his statement and arrested Post. This, however, was a hit to those in AGR, and a director of the company, Evere Drop, called Fel, whom Fel had only been employed for a month now, to his office. He told Fel that he had secured for him a last-minute senatorial appointment to the prestigious Imperial Academy on the planet Karita. However, in order to take this chance, Fel would have to depart at once before his testimony at post-trial the next week.
Ah, gross.
This while being a big chance for Fel, a blatant blackmail attempt to force him into silence, threatening his family if he didn't accept, his father in particular, the man who got him the job there, forced Fel to reluctantly accept, and despite not feeling good about it, didn't wish to burden his family, so he decided to take the offer begrudgingly, leaving for the Imperial Academy. However, a minor silver lining in all of this story, Hal Horn, I'll mention this now. Do you remember Hal Horn? He may come up in a later video, or at least as part of another video. Hal Horn would arrive to meet him before he departed, assuring he made the best choice possible and that he would keep tabs on Post while Fel was away at Karita. Eventually, Post was in fact caught again for more crimes and was thus sent to the prison planet of Kessel.
When's Kessel, though?
Shut up. I know you didn't get to say it during the stream yesterday, so I knew you were going to say it the second I brought it up. When I saw it, like, he's going to mention it. He's going to mention it. He's going to mention it. God damn.
Oh.
Cat's going crazy in your background.
I know. She's also wondering when's Kessel.
Clearly. So, this is the mark where his early life kind of comes to a close, and we start to see where Fel takes on his life, beginning to come under the Empire's banner. His academy life starts with him obviously arriving on Karita, being given little time to adjust. His long ponytail that he would have for most of the time would be shaven off, and upon induction to the academy and a life in the fields, turned to one of discipline and rigid obedience. Fel was not quite the intellectual studier, not for lack of intellect, but more for lack of patience. Something that I relate to very much.
Get bored real quick.
ADHD, ADD, man. It's a terrible combination. Pushing through.
For a curse.
Pushing through, he would excel and was taking full advantage of the education that the Empire could offer its elite. He did, however, find both joy and proper capability in more physical activities, such as mechanical classes, combat training, and even partaking in the sport of gravball. Basically Star Wars basketball.
Okay.
Where Fel would wear the number 7 jersey and captain Karita's Inter-Academy League team, and often would be the one leading them to victory. So,
weird. It's weird to think of sports events in Star Wars. It's just a weird thing.
I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of weird, but it makes sense. You gotta have some stuff in. Gotta have some activities.
But board games, like Dejarik, I get that. I can see that. That's fine. Like
I mean, we
pod racing and like racing in general, yeah, because vehicles are cool. And then I'm like, oh, they play basketball like that.
I mean, you got to remember that we literally see in episode 2, there's like droids playing some form of weird football in the cantina in episode 2.
Yeah.
There's like a screen in the cantina where there's droids playing what looks like football.
Weird.
Maybe weird, but I mean, it makes sense.
There's the thing, I could see droids doing stuff like that. But it's
But you
weird to
also
just be
got to
like,
remember. You
people.
also got to remember the time that all this is happening and where
Yeah,
they're
it's
doing
true.
it.
That's very true.
Because we got to remember, we're still at that period where droids are bad. No, they're the bad boy. They're the bad guys.
Don't look too close at the man behind the curtain.
He will try to eat your soul.
All the while screaming, die! Die!
So, of course, Fel would exceed in all his classes and activities, but his favorite and probably the highest performing course for him was, of course, the piloting classes, where he would be among the top of his class, rivaled only by one, a young cadet by the name of Han Solo.
Not that guy.
Now, Fel and Solo actually shared quite a rivalry during Solo's tenure at the Academy. And their rivalry actually stood as a bar that most cadets actually tried to reach for. They wanted to reach the echelon that those two set for the entire Academy. Despite their similarities, however, Solo was not exactly a fan of Fel due to his more clean nature. Solo obviously being involved with a more roguish group.
Who'd have thought?
Now, it's not to say that they exactly hated each other, as they did actually. Their rivalry was one built out of mutual respect for one another. So there was no ill will between the two, even despite what would happen later. Though not making any friends with the good cadet Solo, Fel would have at least one friend he'd make during the academy. A man by the name of Darv Eldon, who we will see come up later on. This was probably the one. This was a friend of Fel's who actually was a friend of his even back on Corellia. So
fancy.
their academy life would come to a close, them graduating with Fel, the duo of Solo and Fel, graduating as valedictorian and salutatorian, respectively, and even catching the attention of both Darth Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin, the latter of whom would come out to congratulate Fel on his accomplishments, and would be the one pointedly watching his career after Fel would reply a remark along the lines of his accomplishments had made the accomplishments he had made paled in comparison to the honor of serving the Empire.
I will watch your career with great interest.
Basically what happened there. This officially marks where Fel begins his tenure as a proper Imperial pilot. So, Fel would come to graduate as a lieutenant in the year 7 BBY and was inducted into the Imperial Navy's Pilot Corps. He was assigned to command a flight of the 6th Squadron of the 37th Imperial Fighter Wing under one Captain Lun Tessera. This position was to be a prime assignment up and coming of a would-be officer. His first posting being aboard the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser Abrogator. He Fel would not have to wait long to see his first few combats, with a mission to the planet Saloch, assigned to suppress the remnants of the Lorton fanatics and saving the local Tunroth people. Their campaign would continue against the Lorton fanatics, left over from the crushing of the Wrestlian Purge, and Fel guided his men through many battles. Excuse me. His men being well taken care of and giving the enemy plenty to worry about. He would develop his leadership well, and when the acting commander Tessera would suffer from a condition known as a temp flu. With only weeks left in his 1 year tour of duty, Tessera had hung back to play it safe, while Fel would take charge and proceed to take over drilling the squadron, building habits of order and study, even putting some emphasis towards the post-battle analysis. These actions would come to see the 637th to become one of the Empire's best. After a year in this campaign, Fel was promoted to the rank of captain and set to be transferred into fleet ops, as was customary. However,
Okay.
when he
So
learned,
what is fleet ops?
so fleet operate, this would be where he starts actually getting a proper naval course. Like he gets command over big ships.
Oh, okay.
He gets to take over as an officer in the fleet rather than being a pilot.
Okay. Cool.
So he would be he'd be set to transfer, but he would come to learn that the last refuge of Lortons had been discovered and would be assaulted in what would likely be a bloody fight. Fel felt it was his duty to stay, volunteering, unlike many had expected to stay on for another tour with the 637th. He would serve another year out in there, and this would serve as the first of many cases of Fel's outstanding career and talent, seeing the end of the Lorton campaign and eventually going in to take over in Fleet Ops. When he would take over as a proper commander, a proper command role in Imperial Fleet Ops, he would be among the youngest men to earn the honor of captain rank. He commanded patrol ships for Imperial Customs long enough to develop a healthy respect for the capabilities of smugglers. The great majority of his time serving in Fleet Ops was spent aboard his largest command to date, the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser Pride of the Senate.
Oh,
For
what a terrible name.
For 2 years, he would be commanding, finding his ship overall to be old, outmoded, and underwhelming in performance. However, like many in officer roles, he had aspirations of one day earning a proper command on one of the infamous Imperial Star Destroyers. If not that, he would at least prefer to return to the cockpit of a TIE fighter. He was still determined to ride out this command, and despite bitter feelings on it, his men respected him and his command style, along with his accomplishments and the care he showed for those under him. He would build strong rapport with the pilots on board, and he would continue to serve out in this command to the best of his abilities. By the year 2 BBY, Fel was attached to the Hutt Space Sector Group under one Admiral Winstel Greelanx. He, Captain Reldo Dovlis, and Admiral Greelanx commanded the 3 dreadnoughts of the relatively undersupplied fleet, all under the command of a Moff by the name of Sarn Shield. Commanding the Carrack cruiser Vigilance, his good friend, now Captain Darv Eldon, at some point ending up stationed at the Imperial Classified Yards for quite a bit of time, acting as a test pilot for various experimental ties. To name
Oh,
some of them,
like the bad ones. No.
the ones they actually tested are some of the. I guess you can say they're the good ones.
Okay.
They have the hunt. They would come to test the hunter, aggressor, defender, and phantom.
Okay, yeah, no, those are some of the good ones.
I like that there are good and bad ties for you now after our TIE
Yeah,
Fighter
it's
video.
awful. It's awful. I didn't want this information in my brain.
It's good. So their insights, serving as test pilots there, would actually come to be a proper documented record in the Imperial Handbook, a commander's guide, the official field guide for the military. In this, they would actually note all the insights they had on the basic stats of each fighter. And during the same tenure, uh, Shield would call for a base Delta Zero assault on the Hutt home moon of Nar Shaddaa after a bit of a scuffle between the Moth and a group of Hutts with whom Shield had been making some deals with, and when he got too greedy, the Hutts decided, no, screw you.
As they
And
do.
and
No
in
one
response,
outbreeds the hut.
well, apparently no one outfucks the Empire because Sheld would, as I said, Sheld called for a base Delta Zero assault on Nar Shaddaa, razing its cityscape to the ground.
Ah, the old terrorist treatment.
Sheld ordered ships to come in and blast the the city moon of Nar Shaddaa to the ground,
Insane.
which does explain a few things for why we never hear much of Nar Shaddaa in later stories.
That sucks. Narshada's dope.
Well, it was dope. Now it's just rubble.
So they
Um,
rebuild it like terrorists. Where are the horrible little gremlin creatures that live in the Undercity?
oh, they exist too. If I remember the Dark Empire story, they exist because they
Wait,
do
hold on.
actually go back there during Dark Empire.
Are you telling me there's Rakghoul that live in this in the underground of Nar Shaddaa?
I don't think they're Rakghoul, but there is some sort of monster creatures that live down there.
That's dope.
Because I do remember something about that when I was listening over Dark Empire at one point.
That's my favorite trope.
Big city planet, and then there's monsters underneath it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's wild. Now that little action would in fact start a long campaign against the Hutts, and this would actually be Fell's first long-term campaign. This would be his second longest, but one of the more notable marks on his career. So, during this whole thing, Fel would in fact know of the smugglers that existed around Nar Shaddaa, having formed their own defense group of the planet. Among them would be some of his former classmates, Mako Spence and Han Solo.
So I'm assuming they were just paying Han Solo. I don't think he'd do that
Oh,
because he
obviously,
wanted to.
obviously they would. I mean, it really kind of flip flops, but I think part of it is because Solo probably has some beef with the Empire anyway.
That's
Because at
fair.
this point, obviously, he's not with them anymore. But the whole thing had been the whole thing had felt surprised and disappointed to learn Solo had lasted only 8 months in Imperial service before being court-martialed, defending a Wookiee slave.
Hey, I think I know that Wookiee.
I think we all know that Wookiee. He gets a moon dropped on him.
That guy is a kid.
So The smuggler coalition would come to launch a ambush against the Vigilance, the Carrack cruiser owned by Fell's friend Eldon. This attack would in fact kill the good captain, and this did not push. While it hurt Sinterfell's, well, it did wound Sinterfell. It would in fact also fuel him forward in pushing against the smuggler coalition. Um, Having suffered another, however, while the admiral who was obliged to lose here, having suffered another loss after being ambushed once more by a surprise rush of proton torpedoes. Fell's ship suffered little damage during this due to his impeccable skill at reading the situation. But the good another of the Hutt sector fleet, Captain Douglas, would suffer heavy damage and his ship would be crippled by a Y-wing strike. Fell, who saw a chance still, could only follow through on the orders of his superior when Greylanks called for a full retreat. Fell, however, took this to half-heart, ordering all of the ties that had been called to action back to the pride of the Senate, not wishing to leave a man behind, and especially those of his fellow pilots. However, when contacted after he had managed to fill his entire hangar bay and shuttle bay with TIE fighters, as he was not able to fit all 15 groups into the entirety of his ship, they would have to clear the shuttle bay in order to make room. Greylanks would make contact with him and called him out with counts of disobeying orders and dereliction of duty and whatnot. But Fell, being the practical man he was, both succeeded in saving the pilots and managed to make Greylanks kind of back off when he would claim to put his own report in to Imperial Command, taking the Admiral out to be a full-blown coward in this situation.
Being called a coward in the Empire is not a good thing.
Especially when the entire action causes you to fail, as the entire operation would be one of the marks upon Fell's career, resulting in a large failure that would see him, in the coming days, lose his command and any chance he would have at taking on a fleet role in a Star Destroyer.
Shame.
Days after the failed operation, Greylanks would be killed by Darth Vader over his failure, and Fell would not be demoted, but he would be reassigned to an instructor role at the Academy on Prefspelt 4. Around the year 1 BBY, Fell spent a brief period of time at the classified flight yards, where he too would continue flying the prototype models of the Aggressor, the Hunter, and Defender for the Imperial Handbook, a Commander's Guide. And as an instructor, he was training his cadets relentlessly, making sure that they would go on to become the top pilots around. A list of names of Fell's students is actually recorded here. I want you to guess at least one who may be among this list.
I'm going to say Wedge Antilles.
Close.
Fucking Biggs.
Yep, Biggs is among them, along with Tycho Selchu, who is a rather infamous name for later, Derek Clivian, who is also an infamous name for later, Lane, Renz, and a man who would come later to be known as DS-181-3, which serves as a code name for him. I did look into him a bit. Turns out that's just a code name that he would go by when he takes on the role of a infamous pilot later on. Um, while Tycho, Biggs, and Clivian would become legendary pilots, none of them could ever actually best Fel in the simulations.
Just like in the simulations.
Fel had taken part of his role in command to how he treated his students, for how he would build them up, looking out for them, building a mutual respect with them, and helping to foster trust among students and between the students and himself. During a incident that actually kind of shows a bit of his more unbiased but fair nature, he Cadet Lane had insulted Tycho Selchu with remarks about his Alderanian heritage. During that altercation, Tycho had swung at Lane, and instead of disciplining Tycho, Fel would go to cover for him, holding fault to Lane by insulting a fellow cadet and reminding Tycho of where his loyalties had now lied. While things had once again started to look up for Fel's damaged reputation after Nar Shaddaa, he still garnered attention from Tarkin, even being offered to join his personal guard unit after his pilots had graduated. Once again, however, his career had been marked by the defection of two pilots, Biggs Darklighter and Derek Clivian, to the Rebel Alliance after mutinying and taking the frigate Rand Eclipse. This mark was ultimately a stain upon his record, and while not directly involved with the action, Fel's failure to truly indoctrinate his students would see him unable to follow through on joining Tarkin's elite bodyguard, and instead receive a punitive assignment to the 181st Imperial Fighter Wing, a disreputable unit. Now, everything so far has been an up and down for Fel, but from here, it really only starts to go up. Because while it seems that his career renewing chances had all gone up in smoke, this is where he would truly earn his worth. After his term as instructor, he would enter the 181st, and so at the time it would be called the 180 Worst, as a
that sucks.
due to the lackluster leadership of a Colonel Ever Dericote, an unimpressive pilot and mediocre officer who spent more time cultivating his gardens than commanding his squadrons.
That sounds like such a huge fucking dig.
The unit was a mess, and Fel would not waste time working over the men into shape. Fel was given command of the 2nd Squadron, and during the Second Battle of Ord Benir, after a rebel cell had come in to siege the planet, Fel would come back to retake the world and take out many Imperial fighter. He would come to take out many Rebel fighter craft, with this actually kind of serving as a weird safeguard. So, ironically enough, during the Second Battle of Ord Benir, the Battle of Yavin would occur.
Oh.
And had Fel managed to actually get his dream of serving Tarkin's bodyguard, he too might have been among the millions who would perish among the first Death Star.
There, but for the grace of the Force go I.
So that little stint would actually be a silver lining for him. It was kind of a plot saving element, as his punitive assignment would actually be the thing that saves him from meeting that fate as many others did. And even better, that same campaign would be what gives him a huge uptick in his reputation, as he would be promoted to general, or not. He's not general yet. He does earn that one, but he's not general yet. He earns the rank of major at a gala on Coruscant, where he would also have the next big uptick in his story, meeting the love of his life, Winsa Starflare, a Corellian that
Say the name again.
Winsa Starflare.
It's a Starflare. What a just Star Wars ass name.
A famous actress from Corellia that would become quite attracted to the newly minted major. They would come to date over the time that his flight had actually been transferred to Coruscant, which actually served both to further his relationship with Miss Starflare and also go on to boost his career. So, kind of a win-win situation for him.
Nice.
He would go on to unofficially run the 181st, adding various elite pilots, one notable one being that of Turfanier. And during his time on Coruscant, he would go on to eventually propose to Winsa Starflare, who would later reveal her true identity as Sile Antilles.
Uh-oh.
Now, she had feared that this revelation would be a detriment to his career, but for him, he didn't care.
Oh, what a good guy.
He had spent the last 2 years caring for her and wanting to be with her, and despite her relations to the infamous pilot Wedge Antilles, the known rebel ace of Rogue Squadron, he would actually take into account this fact, and the both of them would actually go on to devise plans for their safety should the Empire learn of her identity. She would, of course, still go under the alias that she had been as Winsa Starflare, and she would actually, and the two of them would go on to hold a lavish ceremony and foster not 2, not 3, but eventually 5 kids at some point in time.
So many.
Now, they only have 2 sons, Davin and Chak. The other 3 will come about later, and one of them is very important. We will talk about that one in a separate video, but he will get mentioned at some point towards the end of this one.
Okay.
So, during this time, Fel had also developed his own gardening interests, much like his commander, being given enough time around Coruscant to kind of tend to himself and care with his family. This actually kind of built a kind of kinship between him and his commander, actually. The both of them actually both working on his garden together for a time. And eventually this was...
Fucking old men hopping.
I mean, it's something to do.
True. Although on Coruscant, that seems kind of tough.
I mean, it's just kind of like you keep a few pots and like fabricated plots or whatever. You know, really do like a whole like farm thing, but just kind of keep a few plots, kind of keep a few hanging plants and stuff. You tend to. Oh, it keeps the place decorated, I think. Makes the steel cityscape feel kind of natural. That's kind of been
a steel cityscape can be.
What gives it more of a touchback to nature, as little as Coruscant has. So, I guess it's something that makes sense when you live in a place like Coruscant. You kind of want that sort of thing.
How many like plants and animals do you think went extinct on Coruscant?
Oh, considering there's only one mountain that still actively is seen on Coruscant?
All of them.
All of them. Dude, I don't even think they can play the whole... there's still creatures that sit in the Undercity and everything, but... We
It's a
also have to
bug
remember
eat
that
bug world.
Coruscant exists several thousands of several hundreds of thousands of miles into the air. They
So
literally built.
all the children on Coruscant were born via Mile High Club.
Didn't we just have this bit with Izzy? Didn't we just
Including
do
his
something like
kids.
that? Not all of his
Oh.
kids. Just the first two, probably.
the current ones we've just talked about.
Yep. So, and then this whole thing actually started to make his career start to shine a bit more. It was a bit of a minor hiccup that may come to bite him in the ass later. That being when a call to action at Dara 4 would kind of make a sort of change for the Major. In 3 ABY, Fel would be approached by a special visitor, and one most in the galaxy would come to know famously. The director of Imperial Intelligence, Yassine Isard. She would try to tempt Fel with both her body and the offers of power, but being one of the few, Fel would rebuff her advances. While secretly upset by the whole interaction, she did try to pass off the whole event as a test of loyalty from the Emperor himself. His reward was admission to stop the rebellion at the planet of Dara 4. After her departure, Fel remained disturbed by the fact that Isard was now aware of him, which, for those in the Empire, being under the gaze of Director Iceheart, as she was commonly known, was not a good thing.
Doesn't sound like a good one.
She's not a good person. In any case of the word, this woman is twisted. We will probably talk about her, especially when we talk about Rogue Squadron. Because she is huge for their story. But after that whole encounter, he would go and order his wife to start drawing up her own set of contingency plans to go and disappear without him knowing. At a moment's notice, he would make sure that she and his family were safe if Isard ever made moves against them. Fel would eventually disappear independently and seek her out after such a time when they were safe. And when Fel would eventually arrive at Dara 4 with the 181st, they were met with a briefing by one Darth Vader and a strange alien admiral who we will come to.
Who that is?
Wonder who that is. Wonder who that
It
is.
couldn't be my favorite blueberry boy.
Could it possibly be? Now, keep note that this little mark was a bit of an odd bit for those in the Empire to have someone like that, have an alien in such a high position. And even then, it was even less likely that the Empire may try to award such an individual. But Fel kind of just bit his tongue on that, despite knowing what was about to happen. The flight was given the orders to target rebel transports, destroying supplies that were vital to the Alliance. And Fel would go on to act as he would go on to take out the fighter cover as well. During such a engagement, he would actually go on to kill the rebel commander Arul Nara of the rebel renegade flight. Though not proud for killing the helpless transports, he simply tucked it away as him and his men having done their duty to the Empire, trying to bury his conscience with his work.
Haha, duty.
God damn it.
He dutied for the Empire.
So, during the relentless debriefing, Fel and the key members of the 181st would be awarded. Dericote was given the rank of general and given command of the planet Borleus. Turfanier was promoted to commander and given Fel's second squadron. And this would be where Fel earns full command of the 181st and the official title of Baron of the Empire.
Dope.
This same title awarding him being awarded not only by the hand of Emperor Palpatine himself. He would come to move his family to Corellia, where he had managed to earn a very fine estate on the planet. They would come to live a life of quiet comfort together, and the other thing he was awarded with was the growing sourness of the Empire's policies, as the alien admiral would receive no commendation for the entire engagement.
That sounds about right.
And Fel's opinion of the Empire would start to sour, not only because of their mistreatment of the alien admiral, but the the looming threat of Isard would also be kind of factors that would push him to more question the Empire overall.
Yeah.
Start to push him towards a sign of dissidence, but still things were looking up for him all the same. He would actually go on to serve as part of Vader's Death Squadron. His flight would be among the battle group that would take on the rebels at Hoth, performing similar roles as they did at Dara 4, hitting the rebel transports that would try to escape the ice planet. His flight would even be upgraded and awarded with a few things after said engagements. His flight would be upgraded with the newest line of TIE interceptors.
Nice.
And a notable thing for these was that those in his squadron who had more than 10 kills would earn the right to mark their wings of their TIE interceptors with notable red stripes, which would become a distinctive sign for the members of the 181st. Fel had taken on the call sign of Saber 1, and during this time, Turfanier was promoted to Major. Ultimately, they would go on to serve in the Empire's big final battle at the Battle of Endor. The 181st,
Cool battle.
the 181st flew as protection for 3 notable cruisers, 2 Star Destroyers, Avenger and Chimera, as well as the battle cruiser Pride of Tarlandia. Flying as part of Saber Squadron, Fel would take out many pilots during this engagement, including members of the Rebels' Blue and Green Squadrons. But ultimately, he would not only fail in his squadron would not only fail in protecting the battle cruiser Pride of Tarlandia, but the second Death Star and Palpatine would also be among the countless numbers of Imperial casualties suffered during that battle. Fel would ultimately survive, as would his wingmate Turfanier. They would go on to retreat to Anaj and would see the rebellion go on to become the New Republic after this. Under the temporary reign of the Grand Vizier of the Empire, Saint Pestage, who is now currently running the remnants of the Empire, Fel gained a rival in this group, one Countess Iran Riad, a noble who ended up buying a modified TIE Defender and would go on to join the Imperial Pilot Corps. Ultimately, she would be killed by Fel after being convicted of treason, and this would also give Fel the addition of another legendary pilot to the 181st. One of the Emperor's hands, one Merrick Steele. And just as Fel had worried, ultimately he would be confronted by Isard once more, who had begun tempting him with offers of overthrowing Pestage and staging a coup, offering to give him the title of Emperor.
Ugh.
This woman is crazy. Did I mention that yet?
You mentioned it in passing.
Well, she's crazy.
Oh, okay.
Like, bonkers off the wall crazy. They had to write a new dictionary term for crazy just for her.
In the Star Wars universe, it's Ice Hard Eyes, not Crazy Eyes.
Icy gaze of Isard. 9 months after Endor, the 181st would be deployed to Brental 4, where they would suffer a large number of losses at the hands of Rogue Squadron when their moon base would fall. Despite her manipulations, Isard would ultimately push Fel into trying to kill his brother-in-law, Wedge Antilles, ultimately failing.
So are they bros at this point?
Not really.
Okay.
We're getting to that, though. That's not far off. But after a point, during this whole exchange at the Battle of Brental 4, Fel would actually down multiple Y-wings of the New Republic. Sorry, I keep wanting to say rebels, but it is the New Republic by this point. The New Republic's aggressor squadron, and his life would come to shift in these tumultuous times. He would not only see Turfanir and the acting admiral of the current little battle group here, one Admiral Isoto, try to, I think it's Isoto. I want to say it's Isoto. It's like Isoto.
Yeah, that sounds alright.
I tried to prop him up. They would both actually come to try to prop him up on a pedestal for all of the Imperials, trying to tempt him with the typical Imperial machinations, trying to outplay Isard and have him take over as a warlord. During the whole, he would actually try to. Isoto would actually try to give him more credit after his whole engagement with Aggressor Squadron prior, and they would actually try to make a big celebration holiday for Fel, something like Hero of Brental or something like that, like the Hero of Brental Day, the Brental Day. I mean, that's where the fucking ship name comes from.
Yeah, you said Brental Day, and it reminded me of Life Day, and I hate you.
However, during one of the final engagements, when Fel would make an attempt to try to finish off the New Republic Colonel Horton Salm, the leader of Aggressor Squadron, Wedge would be the one to intercept him with a clear-cut ion blast to Fel's interceptor, disabling his ship and forcing Fel to be captured by the New Republic.
That's rough, buddy.
So this is where we will see Fel start to change hands for the first time. Note that I say first time.
Yep.
After hearing about his capture, his family would go off into hiding, and Fel would be kept as a prisoner initially aboard the rebel ship Home 1. During interrogations, he would try to relay his legacy out to the New Republic and similarities to that of the infamous Luke Skywalker, how they both could have turned out differently, leading to his ultimate revelation on wanting to defect to the New Republic, having ultimately lost faith in the Empire by this point. Both in seeing how everything had been going, prior dealings with their policies. Ultimately, he just didn't really care anymore. So he
They
figured
broke that man.
if the Empire was going to fall, he at least wanted to be on a side that was doing right at some by them.
Mm-hmm.
So he would come to defect to the New Republic and would actually join the ranks of Rogue Squadron as Rogue 10.
Oh, hell yeah.
He would retain his title of colonel, though not higher rank due to Wedge's captain status. But he would go on to begin training on X-Wing sims, swiftly learning the superior fighter craft. Though despite his Imperial background, many who initially did not seem to care for him, two fellow members of Rogue Squadron would come to his backing. Two of his former students, in fact. Derek Clivian and Tycho Selchu.
Crazy how that works.
And Wedge also being among those that would very graciously welcome him into both his squadron and his family. During some of the earlier engagements, Wedge would end up dispatching some of the pilots, Estillo, Clivian, and Wes Jansen, to Fel's estate after he had been worrying for his family's safety, and to try to invite them into the New Republic proper, before the Empire would come to learn of Fel's defection and retaliated. Despite the lack of presence, they would not find them, but would instead go on to take out the priorly mentioned Elir Post, the for the former child of one of AGR's board members, now turned Imperial intelligence agent.
Ah, one of those assholes. Turned into one of those assholes.
One of those assholes turned into this asshole.
This asshole evolved into bigger asshole.
Yep. Post had kidnapped Fel's nephew, and they would go on to rescue him with the help of Fel's brother Totter and his sister-in-law Jai. They would save his nephew Ferric, who ultimately the whole engagement would give them the push to join the New Republic proper. So, while not able to find his family, they were at least he at least hoped that during that whole thing that they were safe. Fel would also go on a later mission to escort Minister of State Leia Organa to a summit on Iatu, where his squadron mate Estillo ruled. Fel, Tycho, and Leia would fly aboard the Millennium Falcon, during which time Fel would be reunited with Han Solo, and they would come to share stories of their past together, especially Fel's Imperial service. Leia and Tycho would be kidnapped during the big event, the big diplomacy mission, and later they would be discovered to have been kidnapped by they would initially be kidnapped by an unknown party, later discovered to be Leo Leonia Tavira, a former Moth of the sector, and now leader of a gang of pirates. Fel, along with Solo and Chewbacca, then set out in pursuit of a fleeing ship that would chase them to a location called Starforge Station.
Hey, Starforge sounds familiar.
Yeah, I did try to make sure, like, that sounds familiar. Is that? No, it's not.
Shame.
Where they would be confronted by a smuggler named Rate and would later chase their leads to Exilla. This led them to finding Leia's double Winter instead, and it would be discovered that Leia was trying to negotiate a secret settlement with the former Grand Vizier, Sate Pestage, on Exilla.
I completely forgot about Winter as a character.
She's actually got a pretty prominent role throughout the X-Wing novels, believe it or not.
That doesn't surprise me. That's like everything but Skywalker, really.
Mm. I know she pops up a bit during the Thrawn trilogy, but because I know that's where she's initially introduced is the Thrawn trilogy. But I know she pops up throughout the X-Wing novels too. She pops up in the X-Wing novels and the comics, so I know she has a role beyond her handmaiden status with Leia. Um, After a bit of a complication, trying to break Pestage and Leia out, Thel would come to trick one Imperial Admiral Delic Krenel, who had come to investigate the scene, essentially. Fel to trick the Admiral, excuse me, under with a whole bit of trying to play this off as a cover-up, essentially. Trying to play some double agent thing despite him having fully defected. He had no ties with the Empire, but he was still pulling the strings that he had left behind.
Yep.
Eventually, after many engagements, a big battle with Tavira and her pirate group, shooting down a majority of the pilots, they would come across Pestage, trying to extract him with the help of a pilot that Fel had actually wounded during one of the prior aggressor wings, one of the fights with the aggressor squadron, worrying that his imperial background would actually disfavor him with them. They actually were fine with it, and we're glad he was actually supporting the New Republic now. Kind of a quick change of hands, and you were just a soldier on the other side trying to do your job. I was a soldier on mine.
Just two soldiers passing in the night.
Kind of just what it was, especially with the whole deal of being pilots. Like, I didn't know you prior. I didn't know who was behind that TIE pilot. I know who was in that TIE pod. I don't know. I know who was flying that interceptor.
Just some dude. Some nameless guy.
Most of
Dude.
Most of the imps are, so not really
True.
anything to hold a grudge against if you don't know who you were dealing with. But again, they go to try to get Pestage out, but Pestage was not exactly grateful when he learned Fel was the one coming to save him. Especially when he learned that Fel was working with the New Republic. And in a bid to try to help Pestage defect, ultimately he would come to try to mock Fel over the fact of, you should be doing your duties to the Empire. You've been working with us for years, and now you're trying to take me to some godforsaken hellhole with the New Republic?
You should be doing your duty.
You should be doing your duty. You have dues to the Empire that are meant to be fulfilled now. Now help me back to the Empire. And so Fel left his ass there.
Yep. As you do.
Instead of blowing up on the man, Fel decided to ignore him and left him to his fate, which the Grand Vizier would ultimately do, being murdered by Delek Krenel aboard his Star Destroyer. Ultimately asserting Isard's official exchange in power. Now, this would actually mark the first regime end of the Empire during the Warlord stages, as Pestage is the shortest, probably, as his only lasts roughly 9 months before Isard ultimately takes over when she forms a coup. Now it kind of plays hands where Fel's jig with the Empire, the jig was up and Fel was officially being vilified by the Empire as a traitor and the villain of the Brental 4 battle, making the acting Admiral Isoto the hero. Fel ultimately did stay with the Rogues long enough to actually get to know Luke Skywalker and be putting the confidence in his choice. He was, and ultimately after 5 months staying with them, he would ultimately be reunited with his wife in the New Republic. Everything finally starting to look up. He would, however, not get to see the full campaign of retaking the imperial capital of Coruscant. He would in fact become captured, and this would be kind of the last stage of his changing of hands. His long military career would see him go between the Empire, the New Republic, and now the Empire of the Hand.
Dum, dum.
So, though everyone had believed Fel had died though everyone had come to believe Fel had died before the Battle of Coruscant in 6 BBY, he had in fact been kidnapped by Isard and was turned over to Grand Admiral Thrawn, who had hilariously not only been the strange alien admiral that Fel had met during the Dara 4 encounter, but Thrawn had orchestrated the plan for Fel's capture 1.5 years before he would disappear into the unknown regions. A plan 1.5 years in the making.
Thrawn
40
planned
chess
the
master.
long game.
40 chess master. This man is 5th dimensional chess master.
God, I love Thrawn.
Ultimately, the familiar site was confusing at first, but kind of gave him some solace in knowing that Thrawn had managed to do something. And when Thrawn showed him the myriad of threats that existed beyond the known galaxy, this ultimately kind of pushed Fel into a new purpose. Because obviously, we know what's out there. There's a whole lot of fuck shit. There's a whole lot of fuck shit out in the unknown regions.
Bad out there, dog.
It's real bad. Bad enough that Fel would ultimately come to find a forever home here in the Empire of the Hand and among those of the Chiss.
Well, I think you said that the Chiss are dope as fuck.
I mean, they are. During this is kind of where things kind of peter out a bit. There's not a lot left to really go over after this. Fel would ultimately be inducted into the Empire of the Hand at Thrawn's secret base on Neron. Just the unknown regions planets are weird names.
Yeah.
He
put
would
him to
serve
Chiss.
his years under Thrawn's faction and would even organize for his family to be moved into the unknown regions. His wife Sile and his sons Davin and Chak. However, neither the Empire or the New Republic would come to learn of this till later. He would actually go on to take on many campaigns and come to lead a group known as Grey Squadron, a Chiss fighter group that he would ultimately come to be familiar with the Chiss Nissus Clawcraft, their primary fighter craft for the Empire of the Hand.
Which is dope.
Is a really dope fighter.
I like the Chiss so much. Ships are cool.
During this time, he would go on to have the other 3 children, 2 daughters, Cherith and Winsa, named obviously after his wife's alias. And the one who we are going to have a whole video on at some point in the future, the youngest son of the bunch, Jagged Fel.
I almost heard that as Jagatai Khan. I was like, what?
Nope. Is Jagged Fel.
That name sounds familiar.
Oh, if there's familiarity, you may come to understand him when we actually do our video on him.
Okay.
Because he is really fucking cool. If you liked his father so far, Jagged is probably his father, but better.
Dope. Yeah.
They would also actually have a secret 4th child among this new bunch that would be part of a Chiss tradition that I had no idea actually existed. So apparently there is a
secret children?
Yeah, so apparently there is a idea of a shadow child that is to be born in your legacy to ensure that your family survives in case of any massive catastrophe to your bloodline.
Oh.
They are to be born without anybody's knowledge outside the parents in case of any disastrous event that may cause your bloodline to cease, ensuring that your legacy will continue no matter what.
That sounds dope.
It is really fucking wild.
You are the shadow child.
All of his children actually would come to serve in large part of the Empire of the Hand's military. Though only the most notable survivor is Jagged. Jagged Fell is the only motherfucker who actually does see the longest standing. And so, hang on. Sorry.
You're good.
And sorry, getting loud in background. But Jagged pretty much was the big part in probably the biggest spot in his legacy. Though I will go over some of the parts of his later career when we do some videos on Thrawn, the Empire of the Hand, and the Vong War and beyond.
Nice.
Because they do all play. Because his whole family pretty much plays huge parts in all of those bits. The later parts of Thrawn's legacy, especially when we start dealing with the Thrawn clone. When you have to talk about that, they are pretty much the ones that bring Luke and Mara into that whole escapade.
Oh.
Because they organized an idea to bring Mara Jade into it. But that'll be a whole discussion in of itself. Because that also, I think, is where... I think that's also where Davin... No, Davin dies during Vong War. Davin actually dies during Vong War, but we'll deal with that we get to that at some point. Eventually, Jagged is kind of the only one who lives aside from Soontir and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So but ultimately his legacy kind of persists through Jagged and his service in the Empire of the Hand and later the Chiss when that whole org basically gets absorbed into it. Final, the little final spots of this. Ultimately, the good Soontir would lead a storied history in all main lines of the galaxy. A skilled pilot who earned a rare title and reputation among the Imperials in his history. He would marry the sister of infamous Wedge Antilles, father his legacy that a legacy that does in fact live up to his name. Serve alongside the New Republic, and even with Luke Skywalker and his family becoming having big relations in that, and would ultimately become the prime leader alongside Thrawn for the Empire of the Hand. His legacy would go on for at least 3 generations after him, and again, that is a story in of itself. There's bits that must be learned before that. So Fel's story ends here, where his part of things would eventually be surpassed by his son, Jagged Fel. So that's
Cool.
Soontir Fel.
I think he's pretty dope.
He is one of the cooler characters that exist in the Legends lore. He exists in canon, but he doesn't have barely fucking anything to him in canon.
Which is unfortunate. He should have more screen time.
He really should. He didn't even have screen time. He's featured in a card game.
That's it?
That's it. That's his only mention in canon is in a card game.
No! Give him cooler shit. He deserves better.
He does. He extremely does.
Can't believe Disney would do this. Actually, I 100% believe Disney would do this. Fuck
I
Disney.
hope that at least that he gets something when they eventually make that Rogue Squadron movie.
That would be cool.
I at least hope he gets something there. Because otherwise, I don't see him getting anything. If they don't give him anything in that, I don't see him getting anything else.
He deserves so much more. He's so cool.
He deserves so much. But, like I said, if you liked him, Jagged's probably a step up for him. Because Jagged takes Fel's perspective, and you get to see what his legacy goes on to do, essentially. It's mainly through Jagged's story that you learn most of Fel's legacy beyond him.
Cool.
Because, again, like I said, Fel kind of doesn't serve a huge role after he joins Thrawn, and when Thrawn ultimately dies during the Thrawn campaign, when Thrawn goes off back to the known galaxy and they come to believe he's died, when rumors pop up again, that's kind of the last big instance of Fel ever being mentioned, aside from when the Vong War happens. So when we actually talk about Thrawn more, I'll go into more. We go talk about Thrawn and the Empire of the Hand as separate videos. We'll get to talk about his roles in those more.
Nice.
Because I did want to save those from when we talked about him, because there is some stuff that kind of relates him to Thrawn and the wider Empire of the Hand in those.
Okay.
And obviously, they're huge players for when the Vong War breaks out.
Yep.
And that's a whole video I want to do in of itself. That's a whole multi-parter.
Yeah, the Vong War is going to be a little nuts.
Vong War is going to be nuts, and Legacy is also going to be a nuts one.
Yep.
Of course, I think our longest multi-parter is ultimately going to be the Old Republic when we get to that. That'll be our longest multi-parter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
fair.
because we're gonna do when we talk about the Old Republic, we're gonna talk the Old Republic.
Yeah, I was like, really, and then I realized what the Old Republic entails. And went, oh yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're gonna have a huge storied bit for that. We're gonna have a huge bit with that the Vong and Legacy era. Jagged may end up being one of those who gets a multi-parter because his is fairly big. I
Cool.
may be able to digest his a bit more easily, like I have for Soontir, because our I had to cut out Soontir's because I figured his was going to actually push over for time. I thought Soontirfell was actually going to push over on time,
Oh
and
yeah.
so I got worried that after a bit I may have to cut it. And then I thought, with what he gets up to, by the point I was starting to cut stuff out more, I'm like, I can just digest most of the rest of his through like the Thrawn story and the Empire of the Hand,
Okay.
because his pretty much serves that same purpose for when they would ultimately get kind of mixed together. So it's,
Their histories get intertwined.
I mean, like I said, he doesn't end up playing much of a bigger role outside of taking on Thrawn's leadership position when he goes off into the known galaxy again and dies. After Thrawn disappears, Bell basically takes over as the Imperial liaison to the Empire of the Hand with the
Yeah.
Chiss. He becomes the big liaison to the Chiss ascendancy with the Empire of the Hand. So it kind of just serves a purpose in of itself, but it's he doesn't he actually, because of his long service and a lot of injuries he suffers over both his previous campaigns and campaigns he would serve in Empire of the Hand, he ends up taking on much more of a command role, stepping back from active service. Because he ultimately is too. He really starts to hit his age by that point, and so he really doesn't have much he can do after that point. But
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about his legacy and all that, we'll get to learn the rest of his bits. So we have stuff to learn more of him, but that's kind of the general story for this character. I personally, I've always liked Soontirfell. He was one of the more interesting characters and really showed something that Disney continuously fails to do: how you can write a good character in a group that is basically the bad guys.
Yeah.
How you can write a proper character to represent your evil faction. I mean, I guess Callus kind of serves it the same way for Rebels, but Fel just felt more natural, I think. Fel was a good guy all through and through, even despite the Empire's bullshit.
Yeah. He was a on a personal level, he was a good person.
He was a good person, and he was an even better leader. He was a better leader and a perfect soldier.
Yeah.
He did his job. He may have had his morals and his own opinions about the work he did, but he still would be the type to follow through on his job. He had his obligation to the Empire. He
Mm-hmm.
was dedicated to that work, and he had his own aspirations, as typical as they were for your standard Imperial. Want command of my own Star Destroyer. I want to serve in a big position under somebody else who's big named.
Yep.
Both of which never went through, but probably better for him. Probably
Yeah.
probably helped him out in the long run.
Yeah, that battle of Yavin would have been a bit of a problem.
Yeah, serving in that guard unit would have meant none of the cool stuff we learned about him. So, plus he even has his own tie. Plus he does also have a really cool tie to another really cool character. So,
Yes.
um, and before we're actually getting deeper on the after show, the after bits. Do have to bring up the guessing game again, because now we're at a point we're pretty much at a blank slate for this.
Yeah. Which
Because
means my
I've been
guesses are
able.
going to be trash.
Yep. Well, so we're gonna go ahead with a rather. So we're gonna go with a rather interesting bit on this one. So
Okay.
um,
Make me nervous.
see, because I've got a list now. I've got a list I can pull from.
That's so wild.
Let's do. Ooh. Ooh. Let's do. We've kind of had some simple ones so far. I kind of want to do. Let's do this one. Okay. So here's your little hint.
Okay.
So the one I've got for you is revolved around a specific group.
Okay.
The group is notable in an era we are both fairly versed in.
Okay.
And they do have some minor role of existence throughout later parts. But more prominently, they're featured most in. They are more prominently featured in the Old Republic era.
Okay. Okay. Is it an organization or a species?
Is an organization.
Zerka.
Nailed it in fucking one.
Yeah, baby.
I actually figured you may have a bit of tough time on that one. Nope. We will actually try to do Zerka Corp next time.
I hate Zerka Corp so much. I'm so excited.
I figured we've taken a dive on big factions of the galaxy so far. Let's take a dip on one of the smaller groups. And I figured we both can at least verse ourselves a bit on the big shit heels of the corporate side of KOTOR and KOTOR 2.
Yeah, it's Amazon and Walmart rolled into one.
Yep.
And oddly enough, Disney.
Yeah. Zerka is everything bad about corporations. Even worse than the Trade Federation, ironically enough. They quite literally are secretly committing war crimes.
Yeah. I mean, technically, so are the Trade Federation. They weren't supposed to be able to have battle droids, but still.
Yeah, but the Republic didn't exactly have any military after a point. They just kind of left it to planetary defense forces.
Yeah.
So they kind of
when you run into times of peace, you no longer have to keep a standing army.
Then people start to build up a standing army.
Yeah, people other than you.
Yeah. Yeah. It just happens like that. But yeah, we're gonna have a very interesting one because I thought about a good corporation to start with, and I figured what's one we both may have some ideas of, and clicked to my brain just immediately. I'm like, Zerka.
Zerka. See, I was thinking that's why I was like, because you said it's a group that is old but still has like some place in like the newer stuff, and that's why the first question I asked was, "Is it a race?" Because if it was a race, it was like, "Oh, the Ithorians." You don't really see a whole lot of them, or not the Ithorians. The no, I was right. The Ithorians. You don't see a whole lot of them, but they still exist. And then you're like, no, it's a organization. It's like, it's gotta be Zerka. Gotta be. It's either that or it's gonna be like a series of swoop gangs or something, but Zerka's Zerka. It's right there.
Zerka, man.
Yeah, so much.
They're probably the only actual proper corporation I've put into this list so far. I've had to kind of brush over some of the other big corporations Excuse me. Mostly because they've got little actual lore, and it'd mostly just be talking about the shit they produce.
Yeah.
And I figure for most of them, it's probably better to talk about the planet they're from. At least for most of them. Stuff like Sinar, they've got a fair bit of lore to them. But Zorka was probably the one I figured, yeah, why not? We can do Zorka. Zorka's one that's fairly interesting, even despite the fact that they're basically everything wrong with corporations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to do that one because the next one I want to do is next one after that. I do want to do another character video.
Oh yeah.
I do have another character video I want to do after that one because I want to break them up. I want to kind of keep the balance of bouncing between the eras a bit. I figured Zerka's as close we're going to get to Old Republic era until we actually get to talk about the Old Republic era.
Yeah.
So I figure that's probably the big middle ground for us. So next week we will have that. I do we'll have a character episode on the next one, and I think we'll also actually cover a planet after our first character, after our next character one.
Ooh.
Because if I've got everything right, I may actually. Next week we do a Next week we'd be doing a. Next week would be Zerka. Then after that we would be doing another character, do a planet, and we can do one more, and then after that. So I do actually have a whole kind of lineup established for a Halloween themed segment for when October kicks off.
Ooh.
There's a
Oh,
whole
is it gonna be the zombies?
no, I do want to talk about them at some point, but there's a sort of lineage that I do have to discuss when we get into there's a sort of lineage I want to discuss, which we'll start with a we'll probably do another planet on probably do a planet to open it off that last week of September.
Yeah.
And then after that, we'll be running we're doing a 4 streak run of pretty much 4 group. We'll do the group that's tied to this planet and 3 notable characters that have come out of that planet.
Okay.
So we will toy around with that idea in the future. And yeah. Hope the chunk of multitudes of Imperial lore has kind of settled on your brain a bit.
Yes.
Because now we get to kind of push out of the Imperial realm a bit and push into other parts of Star Wars.
Hooray.
We'll get to
Star Wars
poke
is
at the
fun.
other. We'll get to poke at some of the other bits, and Zerka's gonna be a meaty chunk of kind of fair bit of corporate stuff. Because that's probably the best basis outside of like doing the Trade Federation or something for like here's a big corporation of Star Wars.
Yes.
So we'll have to do that, and I think you'll be excited about the next character I want to do. Because I think you particularly will be a fan of this character.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are. So
I am excited.
we'll get to play around with that. We'll have some story stuff to play around with, and yeah, hope to see you all at the next one. Bit of it, bit of a note for next week. To do have Tuesday planned to do. Do have Tuesday planned to do 7 days with colon beans before Wednesday, where I will be probably doing a bit of a longer stream. Because I do believe I'm off Wednesday for work. I have to double check my schedule because I think I work Tuesday and I'm off Wednesday. I may do a bit of a longer stream because come Thursday, we will have a stream that day where we will be playing Space Marine 2.
Space Marine.
We will officially be starting the Space Marine 2 playthrough.
I have heard good things.
It looks like it's going to be a good release. I actually tried to get Rogie in on that one. I actually tried to get him on that one to join up with that. And as another note, mentioning Rogie, we may actually get to see him once or twice during these podcasts.
Ooh, nice.
Rogie may poke in once or twice for these podcasts.
Hell yeah.
Because he's got a bit of an avid knowledge with Star Wars too. So they have let him poke in on some episodes every once in a while, but he'll probably jump in on the co-op and PvP stuff when we actually finish our campaign proper for Space Marine 2.
Cool.
So hopefully at that point we'll have peeps around enough to do that, and I'll probably be on and off with Space Marine 2 all of next week. I'll probably do, if I'm off, the day one release Monday for Space Marine 2, I may make a amendment to do a stream then. Otherwise, I will probably do one Wednesday and Friday next week. We'll do one Wednesday and Friday after this coming week. So we will try to pound our way through that story, breaking Tyranids and fucking Zinchi boys. Apparently they're in that game too.
Cool. Because I'm so tired of fighting Nurgle shit.
Yeah, Nurgle and Khorne have had their time in the they've had their time in the sun for a bit. Time to let Zinch have a play.
Yep. And we'll never talk about Slaanesh.
We will never talk about him.
Slaanesh will never be in a video game.
I actually want to make a note of that. That you say that. Slaanesh is actually a Rogue Trader. Slaanesh has some presence in Rogue Trader.
Huh.
Which probably just makes sense for the video game.
Yeah. Yeah, CRPGs tend to be a little horny for some reason.
A little bit. But yeah, we've got our plan for next week. We've got our next episode, and I've pretty much got a set idea of what I want to do over the next couple ones. And I hope you will all be ready for when October rolls around, as I know I do poke in on a few scary games for October, and I probably will have some more. I know October will also be packed with a lot of Sparking Zero early on, because I will be playing a lot of that when that comes out.
Yeah, I figured you would.
I will be playing a lot of that, especially seeing as there will be custom matches that I can make. Like I can make you can apparently make full like scripted matches that you can do.
Oh, cool.
You know, like custom missions that you can run through with like cool intro scene and everything and dialogue segments. It's fun.
Nice.
I'm excited for it, dude. I'm so ready for it. Space Marine 2 and Sparking Zero are probably the two biggest ones I'm hyped for this year. Like those are my big hype releases for this year.
The third quarter of this year, you're gonna be busy.
I'm gonna be so slack. I'm gonna be so stacked up, dude. I'm thankfully gonna have some feed by getting to play the multiplayer with plenty of draw with the multiplayer for Space Marine over September. And obviously I've still got the Hut playthrough. So we got our glorious Slug Boys. But kind of a lot of the stuff that we'll be doing over the course of the next few weeks. October, I'm probably going to do some... I will try to take a stab at a few scary games, pick up one or two.
Ooh.
I still want to do... I still want to try Ad Infinitum at some point. There's a couple other ones I'd be willing to poke my head at, but I do have some scary games I want to do over the course of October, and obviously I've got a
Nice.
whole scary lineup of stuff for our podcast. So hope you
Hooray!
all enjoy that.
It's gonna be a good time.
Yeah. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend for those of you glorious government workers who actually get to enjoy that weekend.
That's me for the first time in my life.
It's not for me. I just happen to be off that day.
that's how my life has played up until that point. Every now and then I'd have it off just because it happened to be like fall on my off day. This is the one time I've ever had a job where it's like, oh no, you just don't work. Like
Yeah,
no
but
one
you.
works, no one comes in.
Yeah.
Yes.
So hope you all enjoy. I am going to go ahead and call it here, and we will see you all throughout the streams for Space Marine 2 next week. This has been the Freelancer, signing off until next time. Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.